where Rowan performed much of his early material with Richard as the straight man.
At the centre of the Elizabethan world sits the king. Upon the character of the king depends the plot, and so there are many different kinds of king. The benign king. The benign king with a physical defect. The benign king with 2 physical defects. The mad king.
Somebody who saw one of these early shows was BBC producer John Lloyd.
It was not like any review that I had ever seen partly because of Richard Curtis's genius. The lateral jumps it made in terms of subject matter, it would always just start, and often very surreal and rather European, like a sort of strange. He used to describe them as Czechoslovakian cartoons, where this little man would come on and be chased around the stage by a spotlight with the music of a clarinet playing. It didn't obey any of the rules of student sketch writing. It didn't appear to be like anything else. It wasn't like what we were all doing at the time as Monty Python sketches. And very beguiling and odd. And then suddenly this fantastically rude vicar talking about blowjobs,
And a young, attractive bride-to-be came up to me after a service and asked me just that question. Father, what is the church's attitude to fellatio? And I replied, well, Joanne, I'd like to tell you, but unfortunately, I don't know what fellatio is. And so she showed me. And ever since, whenever anyone has asked me the question, Father, what is the church's attitude to fellatio? I always reply, well, I'd like to tell you. But unfortunately, I don't know what fellatio is.
The shows usually took the form of something very visual, sort of mime thing, a famous mime where he mimed to a sort of Beethoven piano sonata.
Another of Rowan's long-term collaborators is composer Howard Goodall.
He is very musical. And we've always done a lot of musical sketches on the stage show, which is probably why I've been more involved than musical directors normally are in a comedy show. He did one where he was a concert pianist playing Beethoven. He did one as a conductor. He did a AC/DC guitar mime, and he did a thing called drumming, which we worked on together.
Well, I was friendly with Richard Curtis, and he was in those days Rowan's straight man. In fact, he was, as I later became, the other person in Rowan's one-man show.
Good evening and welcome to the Boston University Huntington
There were a
Theatre.
number of different sketches, different characters, all of which had elements of what later became Mr. Bean. I can remember one when he was a sketch about someone on his first date.
The first crucial step is having arranged to pick up your date not to look like a complete idiot when she opens the door. Best to look as though your attention has been momentarily distracted. But when you do notice her, it is vital to say how pretty she is looking straight away. But don't overdo it.
He is very, very careful about everything he does. He works out everything in advance. And it'll be the same performance every night. But it was much more like preparing a play. And I think in that regard, he is more like an actor than a comedian, that he'll spend, a long time working out the dynamics of a particular scene.
Once in the car, there are various ways of driving. If you drive like this, you might lose her respect. If you drive like this...
And there was a TV show called Canned Laughter, which he did very shortly after leaving Oxford. And there, if you look at the character, you can see how it's gradually forming.
Hi, Lorraine.
He ties you up a lot.
Oh, my God, look at the time. Help!
Why do you think he does that, Joe?
Richard Curtis and I were writing a full stage review for Rowan with lots of different sketches, and we wrote a couple of silent ones for him, one of which was called Cheating, which I was particularly involved in, and, well, we co-wrote the whole show. And that later became a Mr. Bean sketch. It didn't change, really, at all. It's just that we didn't actually call it Mr. Bean at the time.
I think what he did is to take elements of those different characters and package them together. And that's, I think, probably how Mr. Bean was born.
You're all about 22. You're touring with one of the great comic geniuses of the century. And you're still 22, and you're three friends. So how do you handle that? Because obviously the minute Rowan walks on stage, he has 5,000 people or 3,000 people in the palm of his hand. And it's an extraordinary gift, and we don't really discuss it very much, but that's what's happening.
Hello. It's nice to see you all here. Now, as the more perceptive of you probably realized by now, this is hell. And I am the devil. Good evening. But you can call me Toby, if you like. We try to keep things informal here, as well as infernal. That's just a little joke of mine. I tell it every time. Now, murderers. Murderers, over here, please. Thank you. Looters and pillagers, over here. Thieves, if you could join them. And lawyers. You're in that lot.
Villains are always more fun to play than good guys. That's a well-known fact. And I enjoy characters who have a vindictiveness in them. I always have done it. In the end, it's just more fun.
There was a very funny moment when I first sent him the script of the tall guy, and the character that he eventually played was at that point called Rowan Atkinson, just as a joke. And he rang me up and asked me which part I wanted him to play.
It was somewhat based on his real life, I guess, experiences with Richard Curtis, who wrote The Tall Guy, brilliant man that he is, and funny script that it is, and because he played something of the same part in Rowan's one-man show.
I think the rest of us found it quite difficult to adjust to the fact that he was becoming very famous very quickly, and we were still who we were. And this was way before Richard had become a well-known writer in his own right, so I think there was quite a lot of adjustment to be done in terms of that. And I think, especially for Rowan, difficult for him to adjust as his friends were always wondering whether he was going to buy the meal or not.
The only thing in which Rowe was naughty during the stage show is he did have a lot of trouble describing it as anything but a one-man show.
I remember saying to him once, pointing at the poster which said Rowan Atkinson in his one-man show, and saying, don't you think that poster's slightly strange? And he said, oh, yes, that typeface should be in green and not yellow. So I thought, well, I won't push it.
John Lloyd asked if I wanted to join this team of the people he was getting together to do a new topical, satirical comedy sketch show.
The BBC, who in those days were much more paternal than they are now, said to Rowan, it would be much better if you had some other people in the show, because then if you're good, you'll shine, and if you're not good, they'll support you, and it'll mean you don't have to do a quarter of the work.
So I was at this crossroads, really, and I had to choose between doing a show on my own or doing a show with 3 others. And there was no doubt in my mind which way to go.
Abu Ben Adhem, may his tribe increase,
awoke one night from a deep dream of peace,
and saw, within the moonlight in his room, and to the presence in his room, he said,
what writest thou? The vision raised its head,
and with a look made of all sweet accord, answered,